There are certain skill sets in Counter-Strike that we can't practice in the traditional way, therefore making it a bit of a mystery as to how we consciously improve it. People often boil it down to experience or to just play more, which leads me to ask, what constructive criticism can actually improve our in-game performance and help us evolve as a player? Well, I've collected a wide variety of discussion points that I'd like to talk about, in the aims of extracting my 10 years of knowledge and putting it in you. Every position in Counter-Strike is well known, even to the point of having callouts assigned to each one. This makes it difficult, especially for new players, to stay unpredictable, and can often make us feel constricted in our options. Some positions might not get checked, and others are cleared religiously. You can use this to your advantage by predicting the enemy's crosshair placement, playing what's called an off angle. Off angles are good because it places you outside the enemy's crosshair and catches them off guard. It pretty much guarantees a kill, given the angle is effective. Keeping this in mind when you're playing will allow you to transition between positions and have the ability to tweak your stance and make it harder for your enemy. Make sure you don't overextend when doing this though. An off angle is great, but being out in the open means you have no cover. You should also think about this the other way around. If you're clearing a part of the map, jiggle peeking corners is an effective way to check for off angles. Here's some additional ideas you can use to stay unpredictable. Baiting the enemy in. It's sort of like laying a trap for your opponent. For example, you can have a teammate run away from your spot and purposely get seen or make noise doing it, in the hopes that the enemy will assume your position's clear, giving you the jump on them. Another one is using your utility to suggest you're somewhere else. An example of this is if they molly sandbags and then you smoke it, it might suggest someone's in the smoke and they'll spam it. It's about experimenting with each idea and finding which works in what situation. I'd also suggest looking at the paths into each bomb site and take a mental note of each gunfight you'd run into. There are certain places where the T's feel more pressured in their push, and you should remember that. Play a position that makes contact when they're in that high pressure point. This ties into a concept called crossfires. A crossfire is when you and your teammate are holding in a way in which you both make contact at the same time. Crossfires are crucial, as they provide a guaranteed trade at the least. You'll often face flashes and smokes that try to cut off your crossfire, so sometimes you have to get a bit creative. Commonly, setups you see in pro matches will provide a response to as many possibilities as they can account for. You can make crossfires on the fly, or you can have previously drilled ones. Although, this is more team-centric. So let's get back to what we can do as one person in a game with 4 randoms. Well, one thing that could help is thinking ahead of time. Reflecting on the fact that every pro setup takes all known possibilities into account. If we know what our opponent can and can't do, we can start crafting a fallback plan for each outcome as we play. We have our objective, but that's the best case scenario. Account for the worst case scenario, and you'll find you have a response for anything thrown your way. I'd also like to talk about something called conditioning. Conditioning is the act of manipulating your opponent's expectations through consistent patterns. For example, on Mirage, if a player is constantly rushing A and is achieving success doing it, the opponents might start expecting it and prepare for it. The player can then exploit this expectation by occasionally changing their strategy, surprising his opponent who has been conditioned to expect the rush. Conditioning your opponent can be very beneficial. You can plant many seeds of what you're going to do next. Mold their expectations from your default, and then switch it up when they're least expecting it. Much like the other discussion points, we want to make sure that we're not getting conditioned ourselves. If someone keeps doing the same thing, you should prepare for it, but also keep in your mind that they might be conditioning you to throw you off guard. You don't want to fall into that. It's about knowing the intel your opponent has, as well as remembering your own. It sounds overwhelming, but that's because there's limitless situations you can be in. As you grow, it'll become second nature, or you'll just be mid-game and think, this guy's seen me do this exact sequence of events 4 times now. Let's make him think it's happening again, so we can catch him out. We all know what the ultimate goal is in a round of Counter-Strike, and that goal requires a man advantage. So whenever you're moving position or taking a gunfight, you should think about whether you can be traded by a teammate. Obviously this is situational, sometimes risks need to be taken. Your life is very valuable in each round of CS, even if you don't get a kill. And giving that life up, especially if it's for something silly, gives so much ground to the opponent. If you or someone else needs to be traded, it needs to be an instant reaction. Hesitating beforehand is bad because the enemy will have time to become aware of the potential trade frag and set up for it. Though, if the trade isn't possible, it doesn't have to be direct. On the topic of trades, you want to also make sure you single off your engagements in order to stop the enemy from trading. I mean, we don't really want to be facing two people at once anyway. 9 times out of 10, you're just dead. Singling off your engagements is especially important if you're in a clutch or if you're a lurk player. There's quite an art to doing it, and it requires a very composed mind. But if you want to know more about being composed, you can watch my video about unlocking your true potential, and it might help you out. Something else I see a lot of people do is, say they get peeked by an AWP and the AWP misses them. They'll sit in the exact same spot and wait for him to re-peek. You need to reposition. He's going to be pre-firing your exact spot when he re-peeks. Even if you kill the guy, if he calls your exact position to his teammate, he's also going to pre-fire you. Just a swift little relocation, or just use an off angle if you're expecting an instant re-peek. But the main thing is to do it as quickly as you can. Eventually, it'll just become instinct, and you won't even have to think, what's a good spot to move to now? That's the experience part. The first kill in a round of Counter-Strike is really important, since it sets you up for your mid-round. The first engagement in every round is called the opening duel. You know when you see the AWP on each team racing to mid? That's an opening duel. But again, as a solo queue, how do we spot opportunities for an opening duel? And how can we execute it without any pre-existing chemistry with our team? An opening duel is map dependent, and spawn dependent. For example, if you have an AWP with a good mid spawn, it will be a good time to go for an opening pick. It comes down to your initiative and confidence. And don't be afraid to ask your teammate for a flash. Instead of saying, can I peek mid? Just say, I'm peeking mid this round, purple, could you flash me in? As T-side, an opening pick can be tricky. Oftentimes mid is the most contested in a default, but it can be other places on the map depending on the plan. As a CT, it will be easier to spot an opening duel, and is arguably more important for CTs to have the man advantage, since if someone dies on CT, one of the bomb sites will become weaker than the other. This brings me to my next point, which is staying alive when necessary. Sometimes, you don't need to get the kill. Your position will win the round in itself. A T-side example of this could be if you've got timing and snuck into CT spawn. Going for a kill here could open up a site, but depending on the situation, staying alive in CT can put pressure on other parts of the map and cut off rotations. These kind of situations call for a lot of composure, as it's a key skill for positioning in general. As a CT player on the other hand, times where staying alive is more important could be if you're anchoring a site. You need to make sure you stay alive long enough for your rotators. Hopefully they can flash you in or get a kill and help you play off that. There are obviously countless more examples, and you will notice when you're in that spot. Don't panic. Give yourself some space to think. There are certain cases where you have higher chances of winning the round if you keep your hands off your mouse and keyboard. If you find like a spot that you're comfortable in on a map and you enjoy going there each round, you can learn how to play it more effectively by watching professional demos. When I was playing on a team of my own, my spot on Inferno was A pit for a while, and I was alright at it, but it wasn't really my strong point. So I watched demos from Coldzera and Rops, and I found things that I would have never have thought about. Sometimes it seems out of our league to imitate a pro, since we're not in a pro game, but trust me, some of the cheeky little tricks these lads have are mad. Before I made this video, I put up a community post asking everyone to drop questions about positioning in the comments. I've got 2 cheeky little comments here. So let's read the first one. Green66 says, I don't know when to change my position. This is especially a problem in Mirage where I play short and often the only B player. I'd like to know when/if I should abandon the site and go help my teammates in A. Okay, so I'm assuming your setup looks a little bit like this. Either way, you're alone at B. This gives you 2 roles, the B anchor and the mid support. This is very difficult to do, so I don't blame you for feeling a bit lost at times. Ideally, you would have someone play site for you, so you can extend and have more impact in mid and under window. But let's look at the worst case scenario and prep for that. If you can't get anyone to play B with you, this is how I'd play it. I'd start off with like a molly or a smoke and apps to show that I'm on site. I can additionally jump spot and check if it's clear. B is usually the quiet side of the map, so I'm going to shift over to short as that's where we usually play. I'm shifting because I want to hear if anyone's in apps or underpass. And also if I'm not heard, the enemy will probably think there's presence on B site, which will slow down their push. But in a general sense, if there's no noise at B at all, and it seems like the push in A, I'd probably say in game chat, I'm solo B, should I rotate to A? Hopefully the team would relay the info anyway, but if they didn't say anything, I'd probably rotate through the site and just jump spot or check apps before I left. If you do give up the site and then they take it, it's not a failure completely because you'll know for it the next time. And if they're not going B at all, you can push apps early in the round to get info for your team. But you have to be careful doing things like this because it's high risk, high reward. Hopefully this kind of insight can translate to other situations you might find yourself in. Let's move on to the other question we got. Koya002 says, I want to learn how to constantly keep the enemies on their toes, how to expand game sense and just overall Counter-Strike knowledge. Great question. I love the eagerness to learn more about the game. Keeping the enemy on their toes requires you to dictate the pace of the game. So on T side, it might be easier to do this, as you're naturally set up to push aggressively, therefore keeping the enemy guessing. CT, on the other hand, might be a bit more tricky. You can try taking map control early in the round, and then next round just completely giving it up. But it's just that sense of changing the pace of the game quickly, balancing proactiveness and reactiveness, so that the opponent knows you're the one dictating the pace of the game. But expanding your game sense does somewhat come down to experience. After talking about these discussion points, you need to go and play the game with these in mind, and then when you're actually in that situation, you can start to build like a mental library on what's right and wrong. But you're very clearly an ambitious player and you really appreciate the game. Keep up the good mentality and the hard work, and very soon you will be at a very high rank. We actually have one more question. I know I said 2 before, but we actually have 3. I was basically finished recording the video and then I got this little cheeky question here from Rabby1. He's returned from our previous video with more questions. What a legend. He's saying that he tries to play off angles a lot, but he can't get more than 1 kill, and Leetify shows him a low positioning percentage. But when I play standard positions and hide, I get more kills, so maybe I figured it out. I think you've sort of figured it out. If you found something that works, then you should definitely exploit that. But maybe if you're in an off position and get the first kill, you need to think about what we spoke about earlier and reposition. An off angle is great, but it still can be communicated and heard. Maybe review your demos where you play a lot of off angles and see where it went wrong. Did you overextend? Was it a good time to play an off angle? Did you reposition? Asking questions like these narrow down your options so that you know what the right move is for next time. But honestly lad, keep it up. I'm happy you've seen some improvement in your game. But yeah, thank you for all the questions. Interacting with you guys is easily my favourite thing about making videos, which actually brings me to one thing I want to ask. What the flip is going on? It's all been coming up Millhouse on this channel recently, and it's all thanks to you. What a bunch of legends. But yeah, just had to express my gratitude real quick. And yeah, let's fucking have it. Oh, I feel like I'm walking down a sunflower grove, and it feels so good. I've got music in my ears and I'm letting all